Right, so as you know, it's coming home. Football's coming home, hopefully anyway. The UEFA Euro 2020 Championships is happening at the moment, even though we're in 2021. And there's a few things that I find really interesting about this tournament, which relate to maths and to problem solving. And so I'd like to kind of discuss it here. One of the things I want to know is the format that we're using at the moment, is that a fair format? And also, we're partway through the tournament at the moment, and how can managers, football managers in the tournament, use maths and problem solving to help their team with their tactics, and also how does it apply to other professions as well, such as journalism and betting companies as well. So let me just firstly give you an introduction to this UEFA Euro 2020. It's a football tournament that happens every 4 years, and well, obviously this year, because of the pandemic, it's been moved to 2021. And normally the format, well, at least for the last 5 or so tournaments, is that there have been, with the exception of this tournament and the last tournament in 2016, there would be 4 groups of 4 teams, and the top 2 teams from each group, once the teams all play each other, would go through and advance to the knockout stages. There'd be quarterfinals, semi-finals, and a final. But in the last tournament in 2016, and also in this tournament, 2020 or 2021, there is a slightly different format that's been taking place, and it involves the top 2 teams automatically going through, but then there are 4 of the third best placed teams that also go through out of the different groups. So let me just kind of show you what I mean. And this is what the current, as of this moment, the standings are at the moment. Okay, so Group A, B, C, and D, they've played all their games. So PL is amount of games played, 1, drawn, lost. F means the amount of goals that have been scored. A means how many have been let in by the team. So Italy have scored 7 and they've let in 0. And GD stands for goal difference. That means this number take away this number. 7 minus 0 is 7, 3 minus 2 is 1, 4 minus 5 is -1, and so on. And points, 3 points for a win, 1 point for a draw, and 0 points for a loss. Okay, so in Group A over here, you can see all the teams have played 3 games. That means everybody has played against each other 1 game, and this is the final standing. Now, the top 2 teams, as I said, they go through to the next round. So Italy and Wales have gone through in this group. Belgium and Denmark have through, Netherlands and Austria have gone through, and in this group over here, Group D, England and Croatia have gone through to the next round. Now, Group E and F, they're actually playing their games later on today. Their final group games, as you can see, they've only played 2 games so far in these groups, and there's remaining games to be played. But it's not just these top 2 that go through. As I said, there is in order to go to have the knockout stages, so you can see there's going to be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12 will eventually go through. But the rules and the format of the competition now says that in order so that we can have a knockout stage, we can't just have 12 teams, because then it won't lead us through to a final. We need to have an extra 4 teams. So how are we going to pick those 4 teams? Well, we're going to have a look at the best place, the third place teams. Okay, so everyone that finishes third. So at the moment, we know who's finished third in Group A, B, C, and D, but we don't know who's finished third in Group E and F. But we'll have a look eventually. Let's suppose Spain are third and Portugal are third at the end of the games that happen today. Now, we'll have a look at the points, okay, and there's some other terminology which we'll look at in a minute, and we'll see the 4 best out of these teams, the amount of points, or after points it goes to goal difference and things like that. The 4 best teams out of these, there'll be 6 teams, the 4 best ones will go through to the knockout stages. So, this makes me wonder, right? These teams in these groups, E and F, they're playing today, yeah? They know what the other groups have got so far. So these managers of these teams may, in fact, decide on their tactics. Maybe they're going to play in a certain way to make sure that they achieve enough points to make sure they go through. And maybe they don't necessarily need to play to try and win the game. They could maybe just settle for a draw instead of trying to attack and try and score goals and leave your defense open to someone scoring against them. You might play a bit more defensively because you just want to achieve a draw and you'll go through to the next round. Whereas other teams might need to attack a bit more because they know what they need to achieve. However, some of these teams that played earlier on, so Group A played first, then B, then C, then D, they didn't know what was going to happen. They didn't know how many points would be needed for them to progress. So they would have had to play a different style, maybe a bit more attacking, because they wanted to make sure they had enough points to go through. And is this really a fair way of how the tournament should run? That the teams that just happen to be in Group E and F are going to have some form of extra knowledge compared to the teams in Group A and B before they play their games? Is that fair? And also, okay, let's suppose you are one of the managers of these teams. How do you prepare your team? You might want to think, right, what are the different options I've got? And so that's what I want you to have a think about over here today. Is it fair? And can you figure out what the different teams should be aiming for? So before we do that, let's just quickly have a look at some of the rules, okay? Because before we can even get into kind of this, you kind of need to take a look at the rules. And in UEFA's many-page document, we can see over here on page 17, Article 20, it tells you all the terms and conditions of the tournament, okay? All the different criteria in order to, over here it shows you, if two or more teams in the same group are equal on points, on completion of the final tournament group stage, the following criteria are applied in the order given to determine their ranking. So let me just give you a basics again. So the top place team will be based on the amount of points they've got. And after points, if the teams are tied, you need to follow all of these different criteria to figure out who is ranked next. So if two or more teams are equal in points on completion of the game, the following criteria. So you kind of need to know a bit about all this terminology over here, okay? But it's quite, the beginning bits are quite simple. The higher number of points obtained in the matches played among the teams that are tied. That will go first, the amount of points attained between those two teams, then the goal difference, then the number of goals scored, if that makes a difference as well. And then you've got a few other different things a bit further down if everyone is tied on all these criteria over here. So you've got to kind of read through a little bit of information over here. And then also the next thing which is of interest is, well, once we have figured out what the third place teams are, so imagine we pick 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, for example, imagine those two go through. Then how do we determine who goes through here? Well, it's based on the amount of points. It tells you over here, number of points, then the goal difference, then the number of goals scored. Then if that's still tied, then the higher number of wins, and then disciplinary, and a few other bits as well. And also there's an interesting bit over here, 20.02. If two teams which have the same number of points and the same number of goals scored and conceded play each other in the last group match, then and are equal still at the end of the match, then their final rankings are actually determined by penalty kicks. So I've had a check through though, and unfortunately that won't come into play in this tournament because it's not possible for that to happen. I've kind of had a look through that in these final two games. It's not possible for that to happen, but it could have happened in some years. So it's interesting that the managers might have had to think about that when coming up to their final group game. They might have had to think about that. Oh, I need to think about there might be penalties at the end of this game, even though it's a group stage, which is not the normal in previous years. So let's go and specifically have a look at the standings ahead of the games today. So I've put over here Group E. We can see that Sweden are top of the group, Slovakia second, Spain are third, and Poland are fourth. And these are the remaining fixtures of this group. So tonight we've got Sweden are playing Poland and Slovakia are playing Spain. So what I would like you to have a go at is, if you're interested, is to see what the different options the Sweden manager has. Are Sweden already through to the knockout stages? And if so, and if they're not, what results do they need to get in order to progress? So you might want to have a look and do this for each of the different teams. Imagine you're the Sweden manager. What options do you have? And also, by the way, the position in your group determines what match you play in the next round. So in some groups, again, I don't think this is, maybe you want to think about this, is it fair? If you're top in a particular group, you are going to play, in some groups, you play against a team that is third placed in another group, or some groups, if you're top in one group, you play someone that's second in the next round. Is that fair? For some teams that finish top, to play someone that's third in their group, and then another situation, a team that's top plays someone that's second. In the previous group format, it was the winners of one group would play the runners-up of another group, and it would always be that case. But in the last two tournaments, in 2016 and 2020, it's now changed. So some teams play winners play third, some the winners play second, some the people at second play second, and so on. So it's a little bit different. And is that fair? So anyway, let's look at this. So if what I'm and over on this side over here, I've put the top teams, the third place teams over here. So I've got them over here: Switzerland, Finland, Ukraine, and Czech Republic. I've put them already over here, so you can see these are already confirmed as third place in their groups. So I've just grabbed them from here and just plopped them over here, so you can see it. So they know they're third. What about these teams now? So, for example, you might want to think, if I'm the manager of Sweden, I'm playing against Poland. Am I through already with 4 points? Well, you might want to think, well, if I might not be top of my group. If I was to win the game, yes, I think I'll definitely be top, because if you win the game, you're going to get 7 points, and that's definitely top. Nobody else can beat them. What happens if they draw the game? If they draw, then they're going to increase by 1 point. So if they draw, they'll be on 5 points. So if they're going to draw against Poland, well, Poland will then be on 2, Sweden will be on 5. Now, it will therefore depend on this other game. Now, if Slovakia win against Spain, then Slovakia will be on 6. If Spain win, Spain will be on 0. If there was a draw in that game, then it would be 4 for Slovakia, and Spain would be on 3. And if Spain was to win, oops, sorry, not 0. Spain would still be on 2 points. So this is if Slovakia win. If they draw, then they'll be on 4, and Spain will be on 3. And if Slovakia lose, then they'll be on 3, and Spain will be on 5. And then you have to think, well, if Slovakia win, they'll overtake Sweden if Sweden draw. If it's a draw in that game, then Sweden will still be top of the group. If Sweden draw and Slovakia lose, that means Spain wins, then you've got to think about the criteria that we talk about over here to see if Spain will then top the group and beat Sweden. Maybe if Spain win, then they might get more points than they'll be first and Sweden will be second. That's if the Sweden game is a draw. And if Sweden game is a draw, then we said that Poland will be in 2. What happens if Sweden lose, though? And again, you might want to think about what's going to happen over here. The situation if Sweden lose, well, they're going to be on 4 points. Poland will then also be on 4 points. Now, who would then go? Would they still go through then? Especially if maybe if this game is Spain wins that or Slovakia wins. Well, in fact, we can kind of actually see that it doesn't actually matter what the score is. Sweden are actually going to be through, whether they win, draw, or lose. The worst that they could be is in third place. You see, if they lose, then they'll be on 4, and they'll be on 4. And Slovakia, if they win, Slovakia wins, they'll be on 6. And Spain will be on 2. So Sweden will be in third place, or could be first place. Sorry, they could be in. That will be first. Poland will be second, because of the rules that are stipulated over here. The highest number of points obtained between the 2 matches. So Poland would overtake Sweden, and Sweden would be third. That's if they lose their game. But if they lose their game and they become and we don't know what would happen over here. So if Slovakia win. If it's a draw, then they'll be on 4 and they'll be on 3, and you can see what happens over there. You need to have a look at the results between Slovakia and Sweden as well. And if Spain was to win, then Spain would be on 5, Slovakia would be on 3, and so the worst case scenario for Sweden is they'll be on 4 points. Now, 4 points, because there's already been 4 teams that have already been played their games, then Sweden would be on 4 points. It doesn't even matter what happens in this group at the moment, but they know that they're going to beat this team and this team. So the worst that they could come out is 4th. Imagine if they would come 1st and 2nd. Doesn't matter. They could lose 10-0. It wouldn't really affect their goal difference too much. They'd still be at least in 4th place, and they'd beat those 2 teams that are on 3 points. So Sweden know, in fact, that they are already through to the next round. Doesn't matter whether they win, draw or lose, but they obviously might want to try and win their game to give them a bit more momentum, to face an easier team in the next round and so on. But this is what I mean about trying to figure out what the options are for each team. Okay, so Sweden, that's how they might want to play to try and do this or whatever. Whereas some of the other teams over here, maybe Spain, they might realize, well, actually, if we just draw the game against Slovakia, okay, as long as Poland don't beat Sweden, then so imagine if Spain draw that game, they'll be on 3, Slovakia will be on 4. And if they know, for example, at half-time in the game between Sweden and Poland, because these matches are being played at the same time, if Spain know that Sweden are winning 3-0 against Poland, well, then Sweden will be on 7. And 3 points would actually be enough, because if they're drawing the game, their goal difference would be 0. So they would actually fit in over here. There'd be 3, but with a goal difference of 0. So Spain, imagine if they're playing Slovakia, they're drawing in the last 10 minutes of the game, maybe they've got a man sent off as well, they're really struggling. Do they need to push forward to try and score a goal? Well, if they know the score in this game, and they know what has already happened in the other games, they know they're going to sit nicely in over here, and they can just defend for the last few minutes of the game, and as long as they don't concede a goal, they'll be through to the next round. So do they have an advantage compared to some of these teams? Well, I'll let you decide that. And so it will also affect, as I said, the Spanish manager. If he knows all this information, he might then play the remaining few minutes of the game or whatever, or decide his tactics appropriately to make sure that they draw the game. So that's how we can see how this kind of problem solving, before the Spain manager goes into the match, he'll probably have some people in his department, in his team, his background staff, having a look at all these different possibilities for Spain. And some of these other teams as well, Slovakia, they'll probably be doing it, Poland, Sweden, all these teams will probably be looking and saying, right, what are the different options? What could happen in these other games? Now, in fact, these games happen a few hours earlier, 3 hours before these games. So these teams over here, they even have potentially an even bigger advantage, because they know what they need they know about this from yesterday. This happened yesterday. They will know what this happens a few hours before, and then they can use maths and problem solving to figure out what they need at the time of their match, so that they know what they need to progress through to the next round. And I find it really interesting that, firstly, that these managers can use maths and problem solving to do that. And also, it makes me wonder, is this tournament and this structure a really fair way of doing things? If you have a look back at what's happened in the past, in the previous Euro tournament, as I did, quick search on Wikipedia, you can see that the groups, the teams in Group E and F, which would have played their games a lot later on than the teams in Group A, B, C, and D, they progressed through to the next round. In fact, Portugal, as you can see over here, they knew in their final group game, well, they can't, to some extent, they knew that this scoreline of 3-3 would be enough for them to progress through to the next round at that moment in time. Even though Iceland scored a 94th minute winner against Austria and beat them into second place, Portugal finished third, I think. Yep, they did. They finished third over there. Even though that happened, they would have known at this point in the game that 3-3 would have been good enough. After 62 minutes, Ronaldo had scored to equalise against Hungary. They would have known, right, as long as we don't let in another goal in the next half an hour, we're safe and we'll advance to the knockout stage. And who went on to win that tournament? Portugal. So, did they have an unfair advantage because they were in Group F compared to Albania in Group A, who didn't know what the results were because Group A played their matches first compared to these teams over here? Republic of Ireland went through Portugal. These Group E and F teams, like over here, do they have an advantage? And is that fair? So, yeah, something for you to have a think about, and maybe UEFA and so on to have a think about before they come up with the other tournaments, because the way that teams are allocated into these groups are done at random. And also, another thing of interest as well is, as I briefly mentioned earlier, how it's determined that the winners of one group will play, in some cases, they'll play a third place team in some groups, or they'll play a second base team in another group in some circumstances as well. And if you're really interested as well, another thing which is really special about Euro 2020 this year, or 2021, is that normally the Euro Championships are always held in one or two countries. Okay, this year they decided to hold them in multiple countries, which means that when teams are playing their games, some teams, for example, I think it's Switzerland, have to travel from, imagine this is our map of Europe, they've had to travel from here to back to there, and they've had to do a lot more travelling than some of the other teams in the groups. Is that fair as well for their matches? The players are going to get more tired and so on. Is that really fair? And also, is it good for the environment as well? Can you imagine the amount of air miles that are being clocked up by this, and how is that impacting on the carbon footprint? Are all these things really good for us in future tournaments, or should we revert back to the old system as was done between 1996 at least until 2012? Slightly different format was applied in these tournaments. Now they've changed it to this. Is it fair? And how can managers use this information? Okay, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.